Didn't I tell all of you that a war was coming? Well, here we are on the first episode of a new series of Battle Guides, featuring Cadenza. Cadenza is a melee juggernaut who uses his amazing unique ability, awesome power, and awesome defensive abilities to crush all in his way. However, that all comes at the cost of being generally poorly ranged, slow, and very predictable. Cadenza's unique ability is Iron Body. Cadenza starts the game with 3 Iron Body tokens, and whenever he is hit, he may spend one of these tokens to suddenly gain Stun Guard Infinity. Also, he may anti them during the anti-phase for stun immunity instead. Now, this unique ability took me less than 1 minute to explain to all of you, and that's because it's really simple. But simple doesn't mean easy. Sure, the unique ability is a failsafe for many of the newer players to continue with their attacks even if they miscalculate their opponent, seeing as that's a common occurrence for many new players. However, there are many things advanced players can do with this unique ability, one of which is to obviously be a risk taker. Generally in BattleCON, you don't want to take a lot of risks, because the problem with that is if you lose hard. If you lose hard, you lose the game. Well, not necessarily, but the amount of advantage your opponent gets is usually not worth the risk. However, with Cadenza, you can make risky plays that can possibly leave you stunned by your opponent. But why do that with Cadenza, especially since he has a lot of defense already? This allows you to basically manage your resources better. You can play worse attacks, or you can play riskier attacks with the failsafe that you can always gain Stun Guard Infinity if you're hit. With this in mind, you can get rid of some of your bad attacks, or do attacks that will net you way more damage than you should be getting. And then here's the brilliant part. If for some reason your opponent doesn't counter that attack, you're able to get a free attack in without spending any Iron Bodies, because usually, if you're Cadenza, you'll deal like 5 to 6 damage every time you whack something. So keep that in mind. You'll almost always stun the opponent if you hit, or if not, you at least trade more than they do. This means that you can get rid of bad cards, get rid of bad attacks, or play risky attacks. But say that your opponent does counter your attack. Just play one of your Iron Bodies and then boom, you've traded even. It's basically a no-risk risk. It's amazing. Of course, there are other things you can do with Iron Bodies, such as anti them for stun immunity just in case your opponents have ignore stun guards or on-hit stun effects. What's really cool about this unique ability is that you only have 3, and no, there is no way to regain your Iron Bodies. Not even one of your Overdrive Finishers will do that for you. You have to live with using 3. This makes Cadenza a deceptively hard character to play. Many new players will just eat through all their Iron Bodies, and that's not the way to play it. As a Cadenza player, you have to know when and where your Iron Bodies will be valuable to you, and where they will give you the most advantage. Remember, you only have 3, so use them well. I'll go over more strategies regarding Iron Bodies later on. For now, let's go over to Cadenza's cards, which, like his unique ability, are not that hard to understand. Okay, now that we're talking about Cadenza cards, let's put a blanket statement over all of them, because this might be a common thing. They almost always have a lot of power and a lot of negative priority. I won't make note of those things anymore because he just has +1s, +2 powers everywhere and then lots of negative priority. Just remember that, and this entire video will be much easier for the both of us. Hydraulic is amazing because this thing gives Cadenza hit confirm, and one of his biggest problems is he doesn't have enough hit confirm. As an added boon, it gives him Soak 1, which is very, very good, as well it can bring your shot up to the magical Stun Guard 3. And even if that fails, you can just Iron Body it later on. Not much else to say about this card other than it pairs well with Shot and Drive, because those two things have a lot of hit confirm, and this basically gives Cadenza big coverage, and that's what he wants because he has a hard time hitting opponents. Next up is Battery. This one's a weird tempo play. It's slow, it hits hard, the usual Cadenza stuff. However, the end of beat effect gives Cadenza the ability to gain power plus 4 the next beat. This is amazing. Seeing as Cadenza's average priority spread is around -2, this technically gives Cadenza +2 priority on all of his attacks next beat, making him usually faster than many middlers in the game. This can be totally insane, because that means next beat you can hit somebody for 5 damage without giving them the chance to retaliate back, because usually you'll stun them. That is amazing. This is also a great way to mix your opponent up, as usually Cadenza just flails around dealing damage whenever he goes. By playing a Battery, you're actually setting up for the next beat with a downbeat play. This is very, very crucial, as you can't be predictable with Cadenza, and Battery adds an extra element of surprise to your attack rotations. Now, speaking of attack rotations, this card goes really well with Dash, as it gets you to be safe and almost guarantees that you won't be hit, and it gives you the bonus to your priority next beat. Another play with it is Burst. Bursting out with a way to dodge the attack, then hitting the opponent for 4 isn't bad either. Next up is Clockwork, and oh my goodness, Clockwork. Clockwork is Cadenza's best style. Not only does it hit hard, it lets you ignore 3 points of damage. That's insane. That gives you with a life lead of at least 6. At least 6! That's insane. Totally insane. I can't even. It's just too good, okay? The main problem with this attack, though, is that it doesn't have a lot of hit confirmed. So you pair it with strikes and drives, the usual. This card is the center of your play, though. It's the center of Cadenza's entire game plan. And I'll go over that later on in the advanced strategies section. Just remember, as much as you love playing this card, opponents will try to dash this as much as possible, so be careful about that. Next up is Grapnel. Grapnel is the only thing Cadenza has that gives him range. And for good reason, because a lot of characters can actually counter Cadenza by just staying the heck away from him. Most of his attacks are melee range, and shot and drive can only get him so far. Grapnel exists to counter that. It's super long range, allowing you to hit opponents on the opposite side of the board. However, be careful, as the minimum range makes it a really hard card to use when in melee range. This card is also an outlier because it doesn't have plus power, but at the same time, it doesn't have minus priority, making it Cadenza's fastest attack in his kit, which makes it really good when trying to change up your playstyle so that your opponent doesn't find you to be too predictable. As an added bonus, the on-hit effect allows you to pull people closer to you. This is amazing against rangers who keeps getting away from you, because as Cadenza, you want to get in and whack people in the face as much as you can. So this card lets you do that. In light of that, I highly suggest pairing it with Grasp, as it takes advantage of the range and speed very well. On the other hand, you can also pair it with Strike so that you don't have to spend an Iron Body just in case your opponent decides to pot shot you from far away. Next up, we have Mechanical. Mechanical is great. It has great power, low speed. It's the usual Cadenza fare. It doesn't have any added defense on it, but the biggest boon is the end of beat effect that allows you to advance 3 spaces. I was talking earlier about how Cadenza wants to be in melee range to his opponent. This is another way to do that. It basically lets you get in on the opponent almost all the time. Since it's an end of beat effect and barely anything cancels those out, you have to be careful though, because it's an end of beat effect, not a before activating effect. This means that that doesn't count to your added range for that attack. So if you're playing a mechanical strike from range 5, you won't hit, or because you can't get near anyway. So be careful. When you play this card, it's usually to set up for a relentless assault of melee attacks for the coming turns. In light of that, I highly suggest pairing this attack with Shot, because if you're playing this from far away, you'll want to hit with Shot because it's the only thing that will reach. Or if you're in melee range and still want to play this card for cycle reasons, you can pair it with a burst. You burst away, hit them in the face, and then just come back nearer. It's the perfect play. And finally, we have Cadenza's unique base, Press. Press is interesting. It's range 1, power 1, priority 0, stun guard 6. That's twice the magical stun guard 3. You will not get stunned when using this card on an average case. Now, it has an interesting passive effect in that you gain +1 power for each point of damage you take. Considering that Cadenza's styles usually have power +1 or 2, and that this base has power 1, it means that when you trade against your opponent, you will be up on 3 life. That's it. Let's say your opponent hits you with 3. So this attack gains +3 power because you took 3 damage. Then your style gives you +2 damage. Then this base already has 1 damage on it. All in all, you'll deal back 6. You deal double the damage your opponent dealt to you. That's insane. You almost always positively trade with this thing, as long as your opponent goes first. And with 0 priority, it's highly improbable that your opponent ever goes first anyway. In light of that, I highly suggest pairing this attack with Hydraulic, because even though it does soak 1, Hydraulic lets you get in by advancing 1 space. Or if you really want, you can pair it with Battery while you're in melee range. Though it's susceptible to being bursted, you don't have to spend an Iron Body to get your attack out, and it has better range than Strike. Cadenza's 2 Overdrive Finishers are Rocket Press and Feedback Field. Rocket Press is an amazing upgrade and finishing Overdrive Finisher for Cadenza. Not only is it an attack that can deal 8 damage and potentially knock the opponent out, especially since you can put Iron Bodies on top of the thing, it's also a great deterrent. See, the before activating effect allows you to advance 2 or more spaces. This means that if the opponent is in melee range from you, you will miss this attack. This highly incentivizes opponents to stick close to you. See where I'm going? They either have to take one of 2 things. They want to stay away from you because you're a melee character, but at the same time, they want to stay near you because your overdrive will completely mess them up. Use this to their advantage because that means you now have almost full board coverage when it comes to positioning and range of attacks. This attack is amazing, and I usually use this as my Overdrive Finisher because you gain benefits even without actually playing the finisher. It's amazing. Now, if you're not into that, you can play Feedback Field instead. Feedback Field is like an upgraded Press. It has Soak 5, and for each damage you soak, you gain power +2, potentially letting you deal 10 damage with this thing. Be careful though, it only has 1 to 2 range, so opponents can burst out of it. And if they ignore Stun Guard, this attack deals no damage at all. But if you are against an opponent who keeps hitting you all the time, maybe a fellow Juggernaut, this attack can potentially knock them out instantly. So be careful about that, as it has great and amazing comeback potential. Now when it comes to using Cancel and Pulse, Cadenza really doesn't favor either one over his finishers. Cancel is great, but since he's not a brawler and his options are all samey, he doesn't really gain the huge benefit of removing his opponent's options. On the other hand, pulsing is usually not great, as you have enough tools to get in the range you need. But maybe you're up against a dedicated range character like Caitlyn or Kadath or Rook, and maybe those characters can justify the use of a pulse, especially if they keep getting away from you. Now let's go to the part that everybody loves, Cadenza Advanced Strategies and Combos. Cadenza Advanced Strategies can be summarized to 2 main points: Iron Bodies and Clockwork Shots. First one, Iron Bodies. Iron Bodies are an advanced thing you have to remember, because as a newbie Cadenza player, you'll be wasting Iron Bodies a lot of the time. As an advanced Cadenza player, you have to understand that not every attack is worth using an Iron Body on. You only have 3 of the things, so remember that you have to use them in the way that will give you the most value possible. This means that you'll oftentimes want to use them on attacks that let you get near the opponent, or attacks that let you deal tons of damage to the opponent. But remember, sometimes dealing those small bits of damage is worth it depending on the matchup. characters like Demetras and Runica benefit from not being hit. So maybe that small 3 attack damage thing you're doing is worth using an iron body on. But most of the time, you want to save it for big plays. And remember, use them wisely. Sometimes opponents have ignore stun guard attacks and attacks that stun on hit. You have to anti the iron body during those times. Because if they hit you and you don't anti, you'll only have stun guard infinity. And they ignore that or they stun you on hit anyway. So it's no point in spending it during that time. So be careful about your iron body usage and, well, be judicious and save them for your big plays. But remember that big plays don't always mean big damage. Sometimes it means getting in and getting into a better position. Second, Clockwork Shot. Clockwork Shot is the center of your Cadenza sandwich. Cadenza literally centers its entire playstyle around this freaking attack pair. And that's not even kidding, that's not even joking. This entire attack pair actually is the advanced strategy behind Cadenza. Most new players will look at this and go like, hey, that's a great attack, I will play it all the time. And that's not a bad strategy because it's an amazing attack, and if it hits, you hit really hard. But once you start getting into the later strategies or more advanced player range, you'll notice that people start playing around this attack. They start dodging it, they start doing dash on the turns you play it. And that's a big problem if you just keep playing it all the time. But what if they're playing around phantoms? See, playing around phantoms means that your opponent is playing around a card that is reasonable for them to play around, but at the same time you weren't even planning on playing the thing anyway. What if they play around your Clockwork Shot, but you'd never play the freaking thing? They will be scared almost the entire game. When is the Clockwork Shot coming? When is the Clockwork Shot coming? When is the Clockwork Shot coming? And when they expect it the least, the Clockwork Shot comes behind them and destroys them. That's what I mean about this card. You have to center your entire gameplay around fiddling with this card. You have to make your opponent scared of this card, but at the same time, you have to lull them into a fake sense of security that will make them go, he's not playing Clockwork Shot this turn, then play Clockwork Shot and wreck them. Wreck them hard. This is really advanced because it gets into playing with your opponent's mind and conditioning them into thinking you're doing a certain sort of game plan. And that's a really advanced strategy to take, and that's one that I really like doing. So if you're into that thing, I highly suggest doing it, and your win rate will go up. I guarantee it. Now let's go to some Cadenza combos. They're all pretty simple. Number 1, Clockwork Shot. I explained this thing. It's amazing, it deals tons of damage, and your entire game plan centers around on messing with your opponent's head. Number 2, Hydraulic Shot. Hydraulic Shot is pretty amazing. It has good hit confirm, it has magical stun guard 3, and it deals 5 damage. What more could you want? Number 3, Battery Burst. Battery Burst is amazing because it's a great tempo play. Not only do you dodge your opponent, deal 4 damage, you also gain the benefit of being the fastest dude alive on the next turn. On the next turn, play something like a Hydraulic or your Grapnel, and then suddenly your opponent will wonder why he was outsped by a giant lumbering clockwork robot. And that pretty much does it for this episode of Battle Guides. Now if you like Battle Guides, BattleCON, or anything level 99 games related, you'll find it in the description down below. If you want to email me or contact me, it's in the description down below. I hope you guys really liked this video. I really love Cadenza. He was one of my first characters, and he just shows that no matter how simple something may seem, there's something more to learn about that character. Now at the end of this video, you can vote again. Just mouse over characters if you want to read more about them, and click if you want to vote for that character. See you again next week, guys, and I'm sorry that there's no battle tips about Armory today. There's just way too many cards for me to go over in that short amount of time. So I'm going to be putting out the battle guides first, this one, and then next week you'll see the battle tips. So I'll probably alternate between guides and tips. And so that means you'll basically see a video every week. Now, without further ado, don't forget your special action, and thank you, World of Indines. Thank you, and good night.